Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Can you die from an exorcism? Did a hairy beast, quote-unquote, attack people in an urban neighborhood in Hong Kong? Did poltergeists really attack a house and family in Bridgeport, Connecticut?
Hey there, and welcome to the 485th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. And those many and varied questions came from my co-host and partner in the paranormal, my dad, and I'm Ben. And this evening we bring you an open line show where we will begin with some extreme paranormal material. We didn't have time for last week's show, that we didn't have time for on last week's show. Then we'll get into your questions, and if you had something you'd like to ask or make a comment or whatever, or just to talk to us, you can call us locally at 401-766-1240, or anywhere in the U.S. you can use 800-449-1240, and that's anywhere in the U.S. or Canada.
Now, before we get going, nobody got the answer to last week's contest question, who was the first major paranormal researcher to write about unidentified submerged objects, or USOs? The answer was Ivan T. Sanderson, a swashbuckling and free-thinking marine biologist who coined the term cryptozoology in the 1940s and later got into UFO and USO research. So better luck next time.
Excuse me. All right, so let's get on with the show.
Okay, now before we begin, we have a caller, and I believe it is Aaron Healy of the CCFA, or the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America, something that we have been are going to be talking about a lot in the next few days, because we are going to be participating in the Rhode Island Crohn's and Colitis Foundation walk on Saturday, I should say. So are you with us, Aaron?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you sound fine, yes. So tell us what's going on Saturday.
So the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America has walks all over the nation that help support patients with inflammatory bowel diseases such as Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. And our walk for Rhode Island is going to be in Bristol at Colt State Park, absolutely beautiful site. We will be located at Shelter 1. There'll be plenty of signage and balloons and things to kind of let you know you're in the right place. And we really just provide a lot of support for people going through this, especially if they're neurally diagnosed. And our goal is to raise $75,000 for this walk to go towards our mission.
Okay. And Ben and I will be there participating. As a matter of fact, we have started Team Behind the Paranormal.
A little late, but
it's a little late. I know it's short notice.
Never late than never.
Better late than never.
Exactly. So we'd love to get anybody in the audience who could possibly join us on Saturday at Colt State Park in Bristol. Or certainly you don't have to do that. Just get online. We have our little web page on the CCFA site, and if you could make a little donation, even if it's a couple of bucks. We have $75 so far, which I'd like to raise $1,500. And again, I know it's a tall order, but we will be there. And we'd like you to walk with us if you can, or at least make a contribution. And how can people get online and find out more information, Aaron?
So the easiest link is to go to www.cctakesteps.org/Rhode Island. And then they'll be able to put in your information and locate your page specifically. But then again, you can always visit our website, www.ccfa.org, for any information about the programs that we provide, other events that we have. We have an awesome event at Gillette Stadium in October. It's a one-of-a-kind of event. And we just have a lot of really great things going on to help bring awareness and some education for these diseases.
Great. We do have a link on our show website, behindtheparanormal.com, and just look on that main page, and there'll be some information there, and you can hit the link, and that'll take you to our page, too. Just before we let you go, Aaron, what exactly is Crohn's disease? I know what it is because Ben and I have a close family member who is a young man who suffers from this and it's really just awful, and we also have a friend who has it. So what exactly is it, in case people don't know what it is?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a very closeted disease because of the symptoms are not very pleasant, to say the least. But it's definitely a disease that affects your digestive system. So it's very difficult for patients to find a diet that works for them that doesn't cause a lot of pain or bathroom issues. And, it's 1.4 million Americans have these diseases, Crohn's and colitis, and not a lot of people talk about it. So that's really what the foundation does is twofold. We help the patients that are suffering right now while simultaneously fundraising, try and find cures for these diseases.
Okay, great. Aaron, thank you for calling in. Again,
Indeed,
folks,
thank
it is the the walk will take place at Cold State Park in Bristol, Rhode Island. If you can make it, please do. Otherwise,
That's Saturday.
This Saturday. It's registration's at 3. The event starts at 4, so you don't have to get up that early, which I appreciate. And and again, check out might be the easiest way for our listeners who know our website. Just go to behindtheparanormal.com and just click on the link there, and it'll take you to the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation website and our page. So, thank you very much, Aaron, and we'll see you on Saturday.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Okay.
You too.
Right. Okay, folks, so let's proceed with our agenda here. I wanted to get through some of the material we didn't get through last week on our Extreme Paranormal show. Now, here's one that is related to our first question that we asked this evening. This is, and much of this information comes from our good friend Lon Strickler and his marvelous site, phantomsandmonsters.com. Lon puts together, practically on a daily basis, this amazing information that he gets from all over the world. And, of course, we can't vouch for he gets it from wire services and various newspapers. And, of course, you never know quite if the press got it right. That's 35 years in journalism talking. So, anyway, a Sri Lankan man died Thursday after, I don't know which Thursday this was. This is very recent. There's no date on this. Died after a bizarre and botched ritual to drive out what he thought were evil spirits from a house outside the capital, which is Colombo, is the capital of Sri Lanka. Police said. And Sri Lanka, by the way, is an island off the south coast. It's in the Indian Ocean and near India, of course, and it's an island nation. The man sacrificed a cat and was then buried in a shallow grave after instructing onlookers to dig him out once he gave the signal of pushing a sword he was carrying through the ground, police said. Now, yes, I was involved in exorcisms as a seminary student, but I never heard of anything like this. I don't know what kind of ritual this is. Obviously, he was asking for trouble. And the problem was even, this is a quote from a local police official, even after 3 hours, there was no sign of the sword coming up from the grave. Okay, well, there you go. Quote, that is when the onlookers decided to pull him out anyway, but he was unconscious. The unnamed official said, the 32-year-old man, identified by police as Maxi Castro, a local exorcist, so presumably think he would know what he was doing, was taken to hospital early Thursday morning, but he had already died, the official said, so obviously probably suffocated. The man had been requested to drive out demons feared residing in the home of a school teacher at the village of Pelanrate, I believe it's pronounced. And this goes on, but I mean, obviously, these things can be dangerous. And of course, the question arises, and someone has actually asked me after reading a report like this, did anybody ever die in an exorcism I participated in? Well, first of all, we didn't bury people in the ground, we didn't, say dig us up later. We didn't do any of that nonsense. The ones I participated in were, except for one, were about 10 altogether. 9 of them were in the context of a medical situation, one of 2 state hospitals, as a matter of fact. Very hush-hush. Many, many years ago. It was in the 1970s when I was a seminary student. And there was 3 of these exorcisms were performed on the same person. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't work, sometimes they worked for a while. And if I knew then what I think I know now, I would say, well, the theology of this really wasn't quite up to the job. We have a certain point of view on these things, and it might not take in the whole picture. Now, of course, any regular listener knows we bring in the idea of the multiverse, parallel worlds, and parasitical entities, this sort of thing, with whom we sort of share a common bio-existence, I suppose, in some ways, but that's another story. So, no, I have never seen anything like this before, and I hope I never do, and this is why you have to be so careful with the paranormal in general, and especially when you're dealing with anything negative like this, because there is physical danger. I think the roots of what folklore calls demons are what we refer to as parasitical entities, because that's what they do. They feed upon our energy like some kind of mosquitoes, and they seem to be able to access alternate universes or different worlds, as posited in the science of quantum mechanics. Excuse me. And that seems to be how it works. Anyway, here's another interesting bit of information from Lon Strickler. This one is this is another, I guess, good lesson for people who are extremely credible in paranormal matters without really taking the time to be a little bit skeptical about it, or sometimes a lot skeptical. Chris Date, or Date, spelled D-A-T-E, a psychic medium, is alleged to have rapidly departed the scene after suspicious staff who hung around after his ghost tour spotted a man climbing down the roof. Now, this doesn't say where this ghost tour was, probably just as well. The 38-year-old, who calls himself Night Guider, with night with a K, tells guests who pay there must be in England, pay £12 a head for the ghost hunt. That's like $20 almost. £12 a head for the ghost hunt, that he can contact the spirit world. During a recent tour of the, quote, haunted halfway hotel, now we're in Wales, halfway hotel in Llanelli, South Wales, 14 ghost hunters were led into the hotel stables, where Mr. Date, or Date, asked the spirit to knock twice in answer to a question. The guests were hushed as two ghostly knocks were heard coming from the ceiling above. Hotel owner Paul Francis, 33, I don't know what this was, British newspapers, they always give everybody's age, said, quote, a member of the staff and a member of the public wanted to see if someone came down from the attic where the knocking was coming from. 20 minutes went by, and this guy jumped down. Our staff grabbed the guy and threw him out. Guest Mike Grimble, 43, said the man claimed he was homeless and had nothing to do with the spooky sounds, but was wearing designer jeans. Huh, that sounds interesting, doesn't it? Mr. Date denied having any link to the mystery man in the attic and said, I'm disgusted by it. It was nothing to do with me. That is one reason that I left. Okay. Lon himself adds a little comment here. This happens occasionally with some of these so-called renowned psychics, but the truth eventually comes forward no matter how slick they think they are. Okay. Thank you, Lon. And again, Lon's website, phantomsandmonsters.com. He collects a lot of extreme paranormal stories. Now here's one that we also asked about in the beginning, too. Hairy Beast. The location, and this goes back a ways, March 1955, I was 2 years old, in Hong Kong, China. And as you probably know, Hong Kong is a major urban area in Asia. It is not a small town. Here's the information. Doors were barred in Hong Kong as the police searched for a hairy beast, said by terrified residents to be a shaggy animal over 6 feet tall. One man, a village gardener named Law Chu, had fought it and lived. The thing attacked him about 50 yards from the family temple. It was covered with long, shaggy gray hair. It stood upright when it came at him. He punched it in the stomach, but the creature fell on him, and they grappled for some time. The creature then went away, loping on all fours. Sometime after that, a woman saw a strange animal galloping past her vegetable garden on 4 legs. And as proof, she exhibited large triangular footprints in the soft earth. They were unlike those made by a man or ape. And that's all there is. So it's not unusual to see, I suppose, Bigfoot or any of these things and get reports of that. But in Asia, it's generally known as the Yeti. And, of course, we often think of the Himalayas or high mountain reaches that are snow-covered, and the abominable snowman, or whatever you want to call it. But the thing that's unusual about this is here it is in the middle of a major city, supposedly, albeit almost 60 years ago. Now here's if you think 60 years ago was a long time ago, here's another one from China from the year 1523. This was also dug up by Lon Strickler, too. Daytime. It doesn't say what exact date it is, except it's the year 1523. A teacher named Lu Yu, who lived in the village of Yugyu, I believe it's pronounced, was standing outside his home under a torrential rain when he noticed 2, quote, ships, unquote, which were sailing on top of the clouds above some ruins across from his home. On the 2 ships, quote, which measured more than 10 arms each, I guess that speaks for itself, he could see several tall men wearing each one a hat and multicolored clothing. Some kind of modern rock concert vision, I guess. They were holding a pole in each hand as the ships moved quickly overhead. The teacher, Lu Yu, then alerted, quote, 10 well-read men, supposedly smart people, I guess, from the community, who stood beside him to observe the phenomenon. The ships then descended over the teacher and the 10 other men and took the men on board the ships. So here's a 16th century abduction, perhaps, if you can believe this. The multicolored clothed beings then passed their hands over the mouths of the well-read scribes who could not speak anymore. I've actually heard of things like this in abduction cases. At this time, other men appeared on one of the ships, escorted like a mandarin and accompanied by a monk. Mandarin is usually a well-to-do gentleman or of the ancient Chinese school. Sometime later, the ships flew away through the clouds and were seen descending about a kilometer away near a cemetery. When the ships left, the 10 well-read scribes were able to speak again, but 5 days later, Lu Yu died of unknown causes. Now, this reeks of stuff you see in some modern cases. In our CBS edition last night, we had John Burroughs, who was one of the original witnesses, certainly a ringside seat eyewitness to the UFO landings and other incidents at Rendlesham Forest in England when he was in the U.S. Air Force, and I'm sure that anyone who listens to this show regularly is an expert on that case because we've covered it so often and so thoroughly with all the major witnesses, including high-ranking military officers. But in any case, this issue with John is one that is very difficult for any veteran to listen to. Being a veteran, it makes me somewhat angry. He has been unable to get his medical records from the U.S. Air Force for a number of, reasons. He's not given any reasons. He has a lawyer now who's been working with the Freedom of Information Act even, and they can't seem to get anywhere. John believes that he suffered medical consequences from contact with a landed craft that I suppose one could certainly call a UFO because it came in from the sky. He and his comrade, Jim Peniston, experienced this, and Jim actually touched the craft, and a lot of interesting things happened. So in any case, this is something that rings a bell with us about this fellow, unfortunately in this case, dying after some kind of contact with these craft. It doesn't mention anything about the 10 well-read scribes or the local intelligentsia, I suppose, from the village. Also, there was the reference to the cemetery is interesting. The ships were seen descending through the clouds, were seen descending about a kilometer away near a cemetery. That brings to mind something that Ben and I heard in 2003 when I was speaking at the West Virginia Paranormal Conference in August of that year in the town of Parkersburg on the Ohio River. Lovely town, lovely people. And there was a UFO presenter. I cannot remember who it was, but I sat through his program. And one of the things that he presented was a drawing of a cemetery with a UFO descending over. The people in the area were known to report cases where UFOs would seem to hover near this cemetery, particularly when there were newly dug graves or new graves or whatever. And this man was wondering, is it possible that these craft are supposed to take people to the afterlife? And I thought that was a bit much myself. I don't see any evidence for that. I think there are far better explanations. But it was interesting, and that's what came to mind when I saw this case reported from the 16th century about the cemetery sighting there. So anyway, I think we're going to have to get to some of our letters here because I was hoping Ben is busy around the studio here and had to get some other things going. But let me get to a very interesting one. We received this very recently, and we bumped it to the head of the line because I thought it was a really articulate and very, very good question. This is from, feel free to use my name. Well, good. This is from Ryan Husser, Ryan Husser in Bellingham, Washington. Not Bellingham, Massachusetts in our listening area, Bellingham, Washington. My wife and I have been listening to your podcasts since the beginning of the year when you had Michael Heiser on discussing UFOs and biblical tradition. Michael Heiser, as you may recall, it was on this edition of the show on WOON here, and Michael Heiser is a biblical scholar who also writes science fiction novels. Interesting combination, very, very interesting fellow, and one of the best science fiction writers I have ever read. So, in hearing your elaboration, excuse me, In hearing your elaboration of the quantum mechanical multiverse and non-local consciousness theories, I'm wondering if you believe that the multiverse is finite or infinite. And Ryan goes on to explain why he asks the question. But in other words, he's asking, if we're talking about what I just mentioned, the multiple worlds theory of quantum mechanics, which we think explains just about everything in the paranormal, not because we sat in a classroom and learned about it, but because this is what I've seen for the last 43 years in working in this field. I couldn't think of any other explanation that really that was really good enough to explain all the paranormal phenomena that I myself have witnessed, and do so with any sense. The old ideas about spirits of the dead and all this, but that just didn't do it. There seemed to be far more to it than that, particularly in some of the injuries I sustained and the physical nature of many of these phenomena. So in any way, that's what he's talking about. And non-local consciousness is a physicists who study consciousness, human consciousness, how we know what we know, the fact that we know, and all this business. They have speculated, most of them, that there is a non-locality involved. In other words, your memory, your imagination is not in your brain. That's why they can't find it in the brain, where there are hints and there are areas where something seems to be happening. Because certainly there are links. But in this matter, there seems to be non-locality involved. In other words, we share, seemingly, if this is correct, our memory, as a species, and even as a whole biosphere. All of life seems to have a collective consciousness. I should say collective unconsciousness, and even a collective consciousness to some degree. So that's what Ryan is referring to when he's talking about non-local consciousness theories. So, hence the question, is the multiverse finite or infinite? In other words, is there a limit to the number of worlds, parallel worlds there can be? Because the theory is, and this is what I happen to believe I've seen in paranormal research, you put the theory into practice, how else do you do it? And how I think it's brilliantly expounded by paranormal experiences and research, is that every possibility that anything that could possibly be, and any past, any possible future, any possible present, does actually exist. In other words, there really is a universe, a parallel world, in which you became a doctor, or in which you've already died, or in which you've never born, or in which you're me doing this show. Think about that. That's what the multiverse means. So he's asking, is there a limit to the number of parallel worlds there can be, or is it infinite? And before I get to my answer to that, I'll continue with his letter. If the multiverse is finite, then each death, quote unquote, or loss of contact from the non-local consciousness to biological reference points, our bodies, or ourselves, which not the same thing, would diminish the overall experience of your or our being. I mean, it's pretty. I really admire our listeners when I have to translate the letter. Okay, what he's asking here is based on our idea that the number of us's there are out in the multiverse, the number of yous, so to speak, to use a colloquialism in the proper sense, he's asking, is it limited? In other words, when you die here, it's not just you. Your life extends out over many, many, many worlds into various versions of you, and it's all you, okay? So, in other words, when you die here in Rhode Island or wherever you happen to be listening, and your consciousness shifts or your consciousness becomes something else that you are where you already are in some parallel world, does that diminish the whole you? In other words, if the multiverse is infinite, there might be infinite numbers of you. But if it's not infinite, then every time you die in any particular world, all of you is diminished. That's what he's getting at here. Does it diminish the overall experience of your or our being? Okay? Unless the multiverse is infinite, or at least one universe exists where one or all physical bodies are immortal, the eventual loss of all biological reference points through death would leave your or our consciousness entirely disembodied and unable to interact with anything in the multiverse. Okay, excellent question, Ryan. Now that I've explained the background of it, I think, well, first I think you have to define your terms. And we're always saying this in the show. What do you mean by infinite? That might seem like a dumb question because infinite means unlimited, completely unlimited. So that when we have a multiverse that's completely unlimited, we have an unlimited number of worlds. That can be answered on two levels. I think it is infinite, but infinity might not be full yet, so to speak. Infinity itself, I think, can expand. And this gets into certain theories of physics that I'm not entirely sure that I understand, but I think it makes sense to put it that way. In other words, look at it this way. Many ancient cultures considered the world, or the worlds, they often used it in the plural term, to be a tree. And my son, the producer, tells me I have to take a break, so we'll do that. We'll come back to talk about Ryan's fascinating question in just a minute. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM in New England's beautiful Blackstone Valley. We'll be right back.
The Extra Point, afternoons on ON 1240 Radio, bringing you local interviews, stories, and opinions on the local athletes with none other than radio great Lou Mandeville. Yes, that's me. Afternoons Monday through Friday on ON 1240.
In times of joy, in moments of grief, broadcasters come through, even when all else fails. Today, with more ways than ever to experience the moments that transform our lives, Americans still choose broadcast radio and television more than all other media combined. We are the local broadcasters of radio and television, reaching more people, touching more lives. Brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
You can depend on us for public service, ON Radio.
Okay, I wanted to remind you once again about the Crohn's and Colitis Rhode Island taking steps against Crohn's and Colitis walk this coming Saturday at 3 o'clock. Registration, 4 o'clock the walk at Cold State Park in Bristol, Rhode Island. If you happen to be in our listening area and can participate in that and join Team Behind the Paranormal for the walk, we can have a great time and get to know us. Ben and I will both be there. And it'll be lots of fun and help raise money for this cause that is very important. You may never have heard of Crohn's disease, but it is a very debilitating intestinal illness. My nephew,
it's very hard
Ben's
to
cousin,
diagnose, too.
It is, yeah. But we see what your cousin goes through, and that's why we're one of the reasons we're supporting this. And if you would go to our website, behindtheparanormal.com, there was a link right on page 1 there to go to our site. And if you can't participate in the walk, at least try to make a contribution, even if it's like $5. Pick Ben or me or whoever else might be on the team when you get there. Just do the click, and you can make the donation right there. And if you can come, please do. We'd love to meet you, and we'll have a good time. They give you food, and it's a wonderful, beautiful location too. So,
and what time of day is this?
It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon is the registration, at 4 o'clock is the actual walk. There's plenty of balloons and things to tell you where things are over there. And
signs everywhere.
Yeah, a lot of people participate. So please come if you can, or if you can't come, please go to our website, make the link, and try to make a donation to the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America. Great cause. Okay, so let's get back to our letter from Ryan Husser here. Ryan from Bellingham, Washington, and Ryan has been asking some very, very good questions about the multiverse. And I was saying before the break that I think you have to really define our terms. What does infinite mean? And this world tree that many ancient cultures talk about, particularly Native Americans, seems to be the expression of a concept of a tree with many, many branches, constantly growing, more branches growing. And that, in a funny way, really sums up what physicists who believe in the multiverse idea have often said. The multiverse can be interpreted in many ways, but it's often been interpreted as almost like a tree, sort of giving birth to all sorts of possibilities, all possibilities as it goes along. So at the beginning of the universe, all right, which presumably might have been the beginning of the multiverse, too. Right. The Big Bang Theory, which there's some controversy about that theory now. But there apparently was a huge explosion of something from nothing. All sorts of material went out. But also space-time began at that. And presumably all possibilities took place at the birth of that, as well as it started to become born at that time also. So not just our universe may have been born, but maybe all universes, and they keep being born. In other words, Ben just took a drink from his wake me up kind of drink here, I guess. Yeah. And if he had dropped that on the floor, he would have literally created a new world. That's how this seems to work.
One in which the station we're on explodes.
Yeah, well, it's that potent, huh?
No, I just pictured that happening.
But that's the thing. So if he would have dropped that, he would have created another world, would have branched off from that, from the world in which he did not drop it. So you've got two different universes being created. This happens. So just think of how many times a day we make little decisions. Everybody in the world makes little decisions. Everybody in the universe makes little decisions, and new worlds are created. It is impossible to grasp. So infinity, Ryan, might not be full yet. Infinity might be the possibility of infinity. And can infinity be full? I don't think so.
Well, then why would it be called infinity if it?
Well, that's one of our terms, and as we know, our language is not up to actually talking about this, and our brains probably aren't up to actually thinking about it, which is why you really have to experience it.
Well, not anymore, really. I don't think our brains can really think about this stuff anymore. We're so specialized that we have trouble going beyond what we know best. You know?
That's right. That's true. That's true. So Ryan's point, and I don't want to lose the point here, was that every time in a finite multiverse, every time one of our bodies, one facet of ourselves dies in any particular world, the whole us is diminished. But you can't lose sight of one thing here, Ryan. It's not just us. It's all of us. Because the logical progression, if you can call this logic in the normal sense, goes beyond us to the whole biosphere. So in other words, as I said, in some manifestation of yourself, you might be me, and vice versa. We all share a common life. The way I put it, each of us is a unique expression of all of us. So all bodily life would have to die out. All biological life would have to die out. Maybe that will happen. I don't know. I don't think so, because all possibilities do exist. And if you can conceive of a world in which all is immortal, then it must exist. That is a possibility. The laws of physics would be different. The laws of biology would be different. But there must be such a world. So with everything out there, all possibilities are there, and I don't think it's ended yet. I think if you do believe in that split theory, then infinity is still filling up and can never be completely filled. The idea that one idea you imply here, Ryan, is that life depends on biology in the physical sense. Now, we're always pushing the importance of the physical nature of things, and stressing the physical nature of the paranormal phenomena we have seen, and saying that the spiritualist approach isn't good enough, and I stick by that. But should all material, in our sense of the word, and there are many, many different senses of material out in the multiverse, I'm sure, should all our biological reference points, as you call it, die out, what difference would that make?
Biological reference points.
Well, in other words, you and I would be, in his sense, biological reference points. We would be points where our selves are, and each other are manifest in physical form.
Right.
One of billions and billions, maybe infinite numbers throughout the universe, the multiverse. And one point, too, is we, I suppose, as ourselves, for what meaning that may have, don't exist in all worlds. As I mentioned, worlds in which you were never born, this kind of thing. So,
well, not we in that sense. So I don't want to convolute the point. I see what you're saying.
No, right. Yeah. Well, so this is, I think that's probably all we can say, but I hope I'm getting some of the points across here that this is an infinite subject, and there really are no adequate ways to express it in words except to say what we've said, I think.
Yeah.
So I think that you may be asking the wrong question here, Ryan, although it is a good one.
Can't get the right questions without the right, or you can't get the right answers without the right questions.
Well, that's true, and I think that infinity is just that. Infinity, it might not be full yet, so to speak. And again, it will never be full.
Right.
And I suppose, in a way, you can draw some theological conclusions from that. One of the things I've always griped about is the very limited idea of heaven in many religions. And the idea that, you get there and you're in the presence of God, okay, that's great, but that's wonderful, but what is the presence of God in the sense of constant, if growth stops, if change stops, nothing is more deadly to the human spirit than boredom.
Yeah.
It sounds very boring, but I don't think that's the way heaven, whatever that term may mean,
is. It's like the Twilight Zone where that guy who was like a thief died, and he 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 thought he went to heaven, but he didn't go to heaven. Like he was at a casino and he kept winning, and then he was like, "This is just so boring." He was just like,
exactly.
"Geez," he's like, "Heaven's kind of crappy."
Yeah.
And the guy that got him there was like, "Oh, you're not in heaven," and like he was just like, "What?"
So God is bigger than all that. I mean, we put God in a box and anthropomorphize he, she, it, or them, and it's I don't know. I suppose that's the best we can do in some cases. So below the line is another part of Ryan's letter, which deserves an answer too. Let's see where the line is.
There it is. I enjoy my singing. Okay, anyway, moving on from metaphysics, he continues to say, I would love to hear a whole show on Bigfoot. Being a Pacific Northwest native, I enjoy segments about Sasquatch and other cryptids. Browsing your podcast library, I can't find a show. I said library. I can't find a show devoted to the hairy ape man, if that's what he is. So I just wanted to suggest a Bigfoot show for the near future. I've heard you mention encountering a noble Latin-ish speaking bear creature. Would like to hear you speculate on any connection to Sasquatch or other cryptids.
Okay, well, there are two very interesting questions there. One of the reasons we do have shows on Bigfoot in our podcast library, but there are well over 500 podcasts, so I would just advise it, just keep looking. I wish I had the numbers of the shows, but that's why we number the shows.
It was down in like the 300s, like the early 300s, because I do remember that show very fondly with, oh wait, no, that was a different show. Never mind.
Well, we've done several shows on that, including on the various films that have been made of Bigfoot, the Kentucky phenomenon, and the various forms of Bigfoot here and there. We haven't done a lot. And one of the reasons we haven't done a lot of shows on this, not that we wouldn't like to, is because it's very difficult to find credible experts on that subject.
Yes.
Lauren Coleman, whom we know just through electronically, is from Maine, not all that far from here, but his schedule has never allowed him to be on the show because of the Sunday night and Monday night slots we have he just can't do that. So we're trying. I suppose we should do a pre-record, but I don't like pre-records.
Yeah, it's not as spontaneous.
No, it's not. But we'll see what we can do, and we'll keep working on Lauren. Lauren Coleman is probably the premier cryptozoologist, certainly in America and probably in the world.
Very credible. Very credible.
Certainly could address that subject, but we are trying, and we will redouble our efforts, Ryan.
It's a very very strange field in that there aren't that many people in it that are actually extremely knowledgeable. And Lauren Coleman's the only one I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, well, there are a few others, but certainly, Ryan, we will redouble our efforts to get an expert and do a Bigfoot show in the near future. Now, the second part of this was this encountering the noble Latinish speaking bear creature. And to the untutored ear, that might sound pretty weird.
We've told the story quite a few times.
Yeah, we have. But just briefly, it was in the Buffalo, New York area. I was out there following up on a ghost report. People were concerned they heard footsteps in their attic and they were afraid in this business. Actually, what I encountered was a very noble multiversal neighbor, if you want to say that, and this was he gave the energy was almost like that of a bear, a very ursine in a sense, and I could see a physical outline because I don't believe these are spirits, and he was on a quest, and his path sort of took him by accident through an area that overlapped with our world. This is how this stuff works, and I had to communicate with him he was speaking a very strange form of Latin, and it took the better part of 3 days to get through what he was saying, and I believe I got it right, but that's what he's referring to here. Was this related to Sasquatch or other cryptids? I never even thought of that, Ryan. Thank you for asking that.
Ryan's just full of great questions today.
Well, this is what we these are our listeners. These are intelligent,
hands-on,
probing people,
hands-on radio,
who do not want to get steeped in the shallow nature of many of the shows today, and that they want to go deeper. That's what we try and do.
Indeed.
So bravo. But in any case, I had never thought of that. I think that the idea that Bigfoot is or whatever name you want to call that sort of creature, is a multiversal creature is a definite possibility. How come you never find a body? There have been hairs found, but they sort of come and go. Many Native American tribes will tell you that they are shapeshifters, these creatures. They'll be in front of you one minute and gone the next. Many UFOs will be in front of you and gone the next. Many things we consider to be ghosts are in front of you and gone the next. How does this work? They know how to cross the world boundaries. Or they just happen to live in places where those boundaries are so thin that you can blunder across them at any point. Human beings have reported having done that without intending to. So in that sense, I don't think this particular creature I happened to encounter was was a Sasquatch or anything, but may have used the same process by which to make his quest. He seemed to be aware, from what I could gather, of the multiplicity of worlds, although I couldn't quite get whether he knew how to deliberately cross them or not. But I don't think this was a Sasquatch, but I think the process might have been the same. So again, thank you for the great questions, Ryan. And we have...
I'm getting your words confused with the word quest. All right,
right.
What's...
Okay, we have a couple of questions from Facebook now, and again, the form on our site that people are used to using is not there anymore. We're going to try to find a way to put it back because we had to change the nature of the hosting platform and all this business on the website. But you can't. But there are links to email us questions, and a lot of people are using the Facebook page.
Indeed, I also got rid of my Facebook for a time, just getting that out there because I need to do work, and it just kept getting in the way. So
some people put them on the public Facebook page. Most people seem to use the message instead, which is fine.
So in case anybody puts something on my wall or whatever, and then they notice that my Facebook disappeared, that is because I don't need it because of school. That's the only thing. It's just getting in the way, and I need to get things done.
So you do have it or you don't have it?
I don't.
Oh, you got rid of it again?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to hear the gripes all the way to China. Okay, well, this is from Facebook, and this is from Phil Paluzzo in Stamford, Connecticut, right at the top there.
Alrighty, so Phil writes to us. Paul and Ben, I have been listening to your podcasts about the Bridgeport poltergeist case, and I was curious if, in fact, you believe something was actually there, or do you think it was a hoax? Well, yeah.
All right, why don't we stop there? All right. That occurred in November 1974, and we've talked about it many times on the show. It was the second worst poltergeist outbreak I ever saw, and that's the question. I saw it with my own eyes. I was there for 3 days with Ed and Lorraine Warren, who were in charge of the case, and these things actually happened. There was no hoax. As a matter of fact, my job was to sort of stick with the little 10-year-old girl in the house to make sure she was not doing any of these things. Police and firefighters were in there, all witnessed things, and I was injured by a television set going over, a floor model television set that had no reason whatsoever to turn over. And again, the skeptics very often will criticize this, well, the house was too small for this stuff to be going on. Well, they weren't there. I was there. And I do not consider myself to be a frivolous person. I do not accept things at face value. I ask questions. I do research. And this, I can assure you, was a legitimate situation here. There were, and again, multiple events over several days. And at one point, I mean, you name it, it happened in this house. At one point, Lorraine Warren was sitting at the kitchen table. There was a police officer sitting there, me, Ed Warren, and several other people were in the kitchen, and a second-degree burn, I watched it as it appeared. A second-degree burn spontaneously appeared on her hand, and she yelped at it, of course, as anyone would, because it was very painful. But no one was smoking. There was no source of fire or heat anywhere near the table, and again, this is one of many, many things that happened. So there was no hoax involved in that.
Alrighty, well, the question goes on. You sort of answered this. Did some real activity happen, or was it a combination of real activity and, quote, enhanced, unquote, by the media? Also, was the little girl ever removed from the house? If so, did the activity stop?
Okay, I'm going to lose track of it. Well, as a member of the media for 35 years, I can assure you that, believe none of what you read and half of what you see. 9 times out of 10, it is not intentional on their part to get things wrong, to not get the facts straight. And unfortunately, today, and we certainly should mention this because our sympathy and prayers go out to the families of anyone involved in this. At the Washington Naval Yard in Washington, D.C., of course, there was this yet another terrible act of violence and we don't know what has been what the cause. We know what the cause was. We don't know how many people were involved or what the motive was, or whatever. And I already have heard people speculating about this.
I'm asking if you'd like to take a drink.
No, thank you. I have that. I'm just a little bit hoarse today. And maybe it's allergies, yeah. But I'm all right. Thank you, Ben. But in any case, the speculating on these things is really rough. And even when they do have some facts, it can be very, very difficult to get it right. And they often will blame the pressure of deadline, and I can testify that is a terrible pressure. And you do try to get it right, considering the deadline. So the media... I will say this, and this may surprise you. The only paper, and this was in papers all over the world, we had reporters calling from as far away as Australia and Hong Kong. The only paper I saw that really got it right was, are you ready for this? The National Enquirer. Because I was a reporter from there.
Irony.
Yeah,
such irony.
I did not allow my last name to be used because I was in enough trouble already with the seminary authorities, but they just used Paul, the seminary student, because everybody in the East Coast in the church knew who it was.
Paul the seminary.
Yeah, that sort of thing. And so that being as it was, the press really did try to get it right, I think, but I don't think there was any deliberate embellishment. I will say this, too, though. One of the strangest things I ever saw, and I've seen in a life of seeing strange things, was involving the cat in this house. The cat supposedly could talk. I mean, I could see the little girl was doing it. But Bridgeport is not far from New York, so the site of reporters from CBS, and with respect to CBS, that's our own network on Sunday nights, CBS News, ABC News, and NBC News, standing around pointing microphones at the cat, asking it to say something, is a vision I will never forget.
Ah, but it makes good news.
Well, I don't know.
If they do indeed get a talking cat.
Well, the cat didn't really say it. But anyway, some of it descended into the realm of the ludicrous, but at the root of it, there were definitely things going on. Did I answer the two questions there?
Yes. Well, sort of. There were multiple ones. There was one that it connects up with what's it called? Parapsychology. He says, also, was the little girl ever removed from the house? If so, did the activity stop?
Oh, okay. We were thrown out, and this is what happened. After 3 days there, and the lack of food, lack of sleep, and everything else, we grabbed what we could when we could. The city had this was all over the news, all over the world. It was in headlines, especially all over Connecticut. There were, according to the police, 10,000 or more people gathered outside this house. They cordoned off the street. This is Lindley Street in Bridgeport, and that was good because on the final night there, this thing attacked, or several of them did, and that's when I had my physical confrontation with it. It pushed me out of the way and threw the little girl across the room at one point. The energy in the house was so strong, I pulled everybody out and put them on the sidewalk, and that's when we noticed that the street was cordoned off. So the next day, the Warrens left to be on some kind of television interview, and I drove back to my home in East Hartford, and just to get some sleep and something to eat. And I was going to go back that afternoon to Bridgeport, but I heard on the radio, the New York ABC station, WABC, that the police had declared the whole thing a hoax, and that was that. And I said, whoa, what's going on here? So I get back there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the policeman threw me off the property. And what had happened was, as we were later told, the police went in, shut down the place, told the family that this was it, the city was tied up in knots, they couldn't handle it anymore, and that the kid had done it, which is ludicrous. Yeah, right, a little 10-year-old girl throwing around 300-pound refrigerators and, throwing appliances that injured me and injured her mother and everything else was ludicrous. And again, there were policemen in the house most of the time. So in any case, that was the end of that. And everything we heard later was through Ed Warren got from his information sources, because he knew several people in that area, and I have no reason to believe that the information sources weren't correct. And Ed and I were on the radio and for several days, battling with the police, saying it was not a hoax. So in any case, that the little girl was around Christmas time, or slightly after that, as I understand it, taken from the house and brought to the Fairfield Hills State Hospital, which fortunately no longer exists, and was given a battery of tests. As we heard it, the events followed her, and this is a typical parasite situation, and because she seemed to be the main target. And when you break the parasite away from the person, there are a number of ways to do that. Then it'll often go to someone else in the family. We've seen that happen again and again. So this apparently was what happened. She was removed from the house. The for sale sign went up. And as I understand, I don't know what happened to them immediately after this, but I know that they had to sink their Christmas tree in concrete that year, because this was in November. The following month was Christmas, and because the tree kept moving. But in any case, she was given tests. There wasn't anything strange found except for the things that were happening around her. That's my information. I don't know if it's absolutely accurate. And the family moved away. I am not sure where. I know that the little girl today would be, of course, considerably older, and I understand that she moved to the West Coast somewhere. So, but I do not know where. I've not been in touch. So, in any case, that's the story with that. So that's.
I don't know if that really answered the question. I guess. Well,
she was removed from the house, and things didn't stop. It went with her.
Right. Okay, so continuing, because there's still more, he says, quote, I have been a paranormal investigator for quite some time, and I've learned that often where there is this type of activity, it's usually a child near puberty. Often when the child is removed, the activity stops, lending credence that they are the cause of such activity. Do you find this to be true?
No, I don't. This is the idea that is very common. Actually, it is the main line in parapsychology, that the energy produced by in many cases a child or someone else going through great stress and trauma is otherwise known as the agent. The agent produces the poltergeist. All right, this might match up with certain, I suppose, traditions that emerge from Tibetan Buddhism, the tulpa. You can produce these things. I have never found that that's how it works. In my opinion, for what it's worth, and from what I've seen in poltergeist cases, these are actual beings, actual entities that are multiversal. They are entirely physical, because I've had physical confrontations with them, and they hear the dinner bell ringing because of the energy being produced by the so-called agent. And I've also seen I've done this, broken the connection between the food source, otherwise known as the agent, and the parasite has moved on to another member of the family who might not have been anywhere near puberty or any kind of classic person that this would involve. You have to keep watching. That's the thing. You don't just swoop in and do even a couple of weeks. You have to keep watching. Ben and I work on cases for years, and it's amazing what you can find out. But that's about all the time we have for that.
Indeed.
And thank you again, Vincent, for the very, very thoughtful letter.
Phil.
Phil. Oh, I'm sorry, Vincent. Where did I get?
It's his middle name.
Oh, it's his middle name. Hey, all right, I got one of the names. So thank you for writing it. Okay, so let's do our announcements. Again, I'll say one more time, this Saturday, September 21st, Ben and I will participate in the Rhode Island Take Steps for Crohn's and Colitis at Colt State Park in Bristol, Rhode Island. If you happen to live in this area and want to join Team Behind the Paranormal for the walk, we'd love to have you with us and get to know you a little bit. Even if you can't participate, please consider making a contribution in any amount. There's a link to our walk and donation page at BehindTheParanormal.com. You can register there, or you can just make a contribution.
And we will have an on-air drawing on October 7th for 2 free 4-ticket family packs. There's got to be an easy way of saying that. For the first New England UFO conference in Leominster, Massachusetts, on Saturday, October 26th, among the speakers will be the famous UFO experts who are regularly on the show. Stanton Friedman, Kathleen Martin, Peter Robbins, among others. And my dad and I will be there to interview them in front of a live audience, and they will take questions from the audience too. And all you have to do to enter this contest is to send an email to us at paul@behindtheparanormal.com or drop us a snail mail at Behind the Paranormal, care of WOON 1240 AM, 985 Park Avenue, Woonsocket, Rhode Island 02895. Be sure to include your name, address, and phone number. And there's also a link at the BehindTheParanormal.com website. And we just found out that we will also become speakers at this event. Okay, and we do emphasize that this drawing is only for the tickets, not for accommodations or transportation. Right. All right. Our CBS show on Sunday, December 8th will mark our 500th official broadcast, not counting special shows. We would love to hear your suggestions about what we should present that evening, your favorite guest, an open-line show, or some special paranormal topic for us to cover on our own, as we sometimes do, or some guests we've never had before. Please drop us a line one way or the other and let us know.
Also, Ben and I will be presenting Behind the Paranormal, A Cosmic Journey at the Harris Public Library right here in Woonsocket, Rhode Island at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, September 25th. That's a week from Wednesday. There's no charge, no registration, and there will be refreshments. Are we done?
Well, no, we still have a few more seconds if you want to
Okay.
do the quote really quickly.
All right, let's do the quote. All right. This is from some wisdom from Jewish author and scholar Abraham Kahan. Remember that it is not enough to abstain from lying by word of mouth, for the worst lies are often conveyed by a false look, smile, or act. I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno, and thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we shall see you next time.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.